Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama on Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events that have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. Turkish president takes an extensive new executive power after outright election win in the polls. Recep Tayyip Erdogan vows to rapidly implement the new presidential system agreed in an April 2017 referendum. European leaders skeptical of developments in Turkey. US Supreme Court backs Trump and rules that president's travel ban is constitutional. Trump applauds top court outcry on streets after apex court backs ban. First summit between Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to take place on July 16th in Helsinki, Finland. Meeting to mend bilateral relations and discuss a host of national security and international issues. India and Seychelles to jointly develop naval base on Assumption Island. 6 MOUs inked after summit-level talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Seychelles President Danny Faure. PM Modi announces $100 million line of credit to boost Seychelles' military infrastructure. Our top focus on the program this week. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is taking on extensive new executive powers following his outright election victory in the presidential polls. In his victory speech to supporters, Erdogan vowed to rapidly implement the new presidential system agreed in an April 2017 referendum that opponents fear will give him autocratic powers. Here's a detailed report.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan emerged victorious in a high-stakes election, seeing off the most serious challenge yet to his political dominance and tightening his grip on the nation he has ruled for 15 years. Defeating the twin threats of a reinvigorated opposition and a weakened currency, Erdogan declared himself the winner even before official results were confirmed.
The election's unofficial results have been determined. In accordance with this, our people have given us job of carrying out the presidential and executive posts. By giving the People's Alliance and the AK party the majority in parliament and therefore the legislative authority, they have given us a great responsibility.
The results were a blow to Wince and his Republican People's Party, known as the CHP, who ran a spirited campaign that threatened to force Erdogan into a damaging runoff and deny his party control of parliament.
We've experienced an election that will deeply affect our democracy as well as our lives and future. This election, from the way it was declared to the announcement of the results in its entirety, has been an unfair election.
On the streets of Istanbul on Monday, some residents said they were devastated by the election win of President Erdogan, while others described the win as a victory for the country.
I'm very, very upset. This is a very beautiful country and I want to live in this country. But as a young woman, everything is in danger. It is becoming harder to live in this country. Women are not respected and the education system is upside down.
I believe that this is a good result for our country. As our president says, no stopping, continue on the path.
Some European Union foreign ministers expressed concern on Monday after Erdogan won more than half of the votes in the presidential election, with Luxembourg's foreign minister saying he was now an omnipotent man.
Erdogan ist ja jetzt ein allmächtiger Mann.
Erdogan is now an omnipotent man, not just de facto but also formally. He spoke about democracy yesterday, now he can show it. He can end the state of emergency, he can let people out of prison. He can reintroduce a rule of law and he can move to different paths with Europe. It's up to him, only up to him.
I've expressed a number of times my worries about the human rights situation in Turkey, and if it won't improve, as I said, we don't have the final election results yet. We should, of course, always remain of the side of human rights and the rule of law.
I will congratulate President Erdogan on his re-election as president. I will also congratulate the Turkish people with a high turnout in the elections. Turkey is a key ally for NATO for many reasons, not least because of its strategic geographic location, bordering Russia in the Black Sea, but also Iraq and Syria to the south. And Turkey has been very important in the fight against Daesh, against terrorism.
Meanwhile, China congratulated Erdogan on his win.
China respects the choice of the Turkish people and congratulates President Erdogan for winning the presidential election again. China has always attached great importance to its ties with Turkey.
Erdogan has dominated Turkish politics since his rise as Prime Minister in 2003 and has transformed the nation. He implemented policies that encouraged sustained economic growth and development. He challenged Turkey's secular foundations by bringing Islamic conservatism to public life, and he gutted public institutions by having tens of thousands of people, many of them his critics, arrested after a failed military coup in 2016. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And joining me to talk about this is former diplomat Shivshankar Mukherjee. Ambassador, welcome and thank you for joining me on the program.
Good to be here.
Some tears, some cheers as far as, some of the sound bites that we heard just now. What does this victory for Erdogan mean for the Turkish people?
Well, I think you put it quite accurately. some cheers and some tears. It depends on, like in any country, a country of 80 million people, it depends on what your vision of the future is. There is absolutely no doubt that with this election, as well as the referendum that was successfully passed, giving Turkey a new system, a presidential form of government in which Erdogan basically has usurped the entire powers of the legislature and brought in a system where in real fact there is hardly any, there are no checks and balances on his untrammeled power. He has set Turkey on a path, if you look at it historically, he set Turkey on a path that was completely different from when Turkey was liberated under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in 1923. Starting from when he came into power in 2003, he has successfully taken Turkey away from the secular path that Atatürk had left behind for Turkey, with the army as the ultimate arbiter of that secular regime, as the ruling spirit of Turkey. So, he's brought in, of course, more Islamism into the government. But that apart, he has successfully arrogated to himself just about every power of the government and has utilized it ruthlessly. I mean, by some accounts, after the failed coup to which your reporter referred to, today the number of people in jail, by some accounts, are as high as 150,000.
Indeed.
And every day brings fresh reports of people who have been jailed for the crime of, quote, insulting the president, end of quote.
Sure.
Also, for the people of Turkey, therefore, I think, the prism with which outsiders look at a particular country may not be the same at all of how people within that country look at things. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that in the 15 years of his rule, Turkey has actually doubled its GDP.
Sure.
So
Ambassador, that having been said, were you surprised at all with the way the opposition performed in this election? You've seen a resurgence of sorts. Maybe in the next election there could be a credible opposition.
I doubt it. If recent history is anything to go by, I think President Erdogan barring something cataclysmic happening, is indefinitely in power. That is what he has, that's the system he has created. In fact, for the centenary in 2023, I'm sure it will be under the present president. So the way that the way the chips are falling now, it is untrammeled authoritarian, well, virtually dictatorial powers that he enjoys. And if you look at the harsh measures, very, very harsh measures that he took after the failed army coup a couple of years ago, blaming, disruptive powers and his opponent based in America for the coup. I have no doubt that if there is the slightest indication of any real opposition to his rule in elections that follow,
sure,
I'm pretty sure the result will be what it is today.
Ambassador, very quickly before I let you go, the European leaders have reacted very skeptically about, what all that's happened in Turkey. Are they going to be closely watching what's happening there?
They may be watching, but the European leaders, by and large, Western leaders, by and large, are guilty of hypocrisy and doublespeak. They cannot abandon Turkey, not because they like Turkey, but because Turkey can, like a tap, shut off, open or close the tap of immigration. I mean, the millions of refugees from the conflicts in the Middle East, particularly Syria, go through Turkey and have become the #1 political issue in Europe for years, including that last night, all-night session, which barely came to an agreement on the immigration issue led by Angela Merkel. That's on the one hand. They are simply terrified of Turkey reacting to any harsh criticism of its authoritarian rule because of this. The Americans need, quite apart from the fact that it's a NATO ally, the Americans need Turkey for the, for whatever is playing out in the Middle East theater, the complete mess that's the Middle East today.
Sure.
In spite of the fact that Turkey actually has played an extremely destabilizing role in that conflict.
Sure.
So they have cards to play, and there'll be lip service to democracy and so on and so forth, but nothing much beyond that.
All right, Ambassador, we'll have to leave to that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you.
Well, moving on now, the US Supreme Court on Tuesday ruled in favor of President Donald Trump's September order to restrict travel from several majority Muslim countries to the United States. In the 5-4 opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts, the court found that Trump's travel restriction fell squarely within the president's authority. The court rejected claims that the ban was motivated by religious hostility. Here's a detailed report.
The US Supreme Court on Tuesday handed Donald Trump one of the biggest victories of his presidency, upholding his travel ban targeting several Muslim-majority countries. The 5-4 ruling, with the court's 5 conservatives in the majority, ends for now a fierce fight in the courts over whether the policy represented an unlawful Muslim ban. Trump can now claim vindication after lower courts had blocked his travel ban announced in September, as well as 2 prior versions in legal challenges brought by the state of Hawaii and others. The court held that the challengers had failed to show that the ban violates either U.S. immigration law or the U.S. Constitution's First Amendment prohibition on the government favoring one religion over another. Writing for the court, Chief Justice John Roberts said that the government has set forth a sufficient national security justification to prevail. The ruling affirmed broad presidential discretion over who is allowed to enter the United States. It means that the current ban can remain in effect and that Trump could potentially add more countries. Trump has said the policy is needed to protect the country against attacks by Islamic militants.
Supreme Court of the United States has just given a green light to Donald Trump's religious discrimination and has given him the green light to discriminate against a group of people based on their faith wherever and whenever he chooses.
Trump quickly reacted on Twitter and later told reporters the decision was a victory for the U.S. Constitution and would benefit the nation's security.
This is a great victory for our Constitution. We have to be tough, and we have to be safe, and we have to be secure. At a minimum, we have to make sure that we vet people coming into the country. We know who's coming in. We know where they're coming from. We just have to know who's coming here. The ruling shows that all of the attacks from the media and the Democrat politicians are wrong, and they turned out to be very wrong.
Dozens of protesters chanting "No ban, no wall" gathered outside the US Supreme Court to condemn its decision.
No court decides the parameters of our community's humanity. Yes. We will continue to resist. We will continue to fight. And for the American people and for our allies and accomplices, it is also your role to help us overturn the legality of these decisions. We know that they're inhumane. We know that they're racist. We know that they're discriminatory. We cannot allow for these decisions to be upheld. So please, we're asking for your solidarity to stand with us in this particular moment.
Today, the Supreme Court attacked who we are as Americans, and we will fight back.
Today's decision is not the last word, either about the Muslim ban or about this administration's long record of anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant policies and actions. We will continue to use all of the tools available at our disposal to fight back against these bigoted, discriminatory policies and to make sure that our country lives up to its ideals and to our beliefs.
Scores of people took to the streets of New York as well, protesting against the decision of the Supreme Court.
I'm ashamed that that came out of our country. I want to show that I'm with everyone, that I don't agree with it, and just see what we can do to hopefully do what we can to change and support whoever needs the support.
The current ban, announced in September, prohibits entry into the United States of most people from Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria and Yemen. The Supreme Court allowed it to go largely into effect in December while the legal challenge continued. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, another international news now. The first formal one-to-one summit between US President Donald Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin will take place on the 16th of July in Helsinki, Finland. The Kremlin and the White House simultaneously announced the place and date a day after reaching the agreement for the two leaders to meet, following a visit by US National Security Advisor John Bolton to Moscow. The White House said that the two leaders will discuss relations between the US and Russia and a range of national security issues. Other issues include the civil war in Syria, Russian aggression in Ukraine, and North Korea's nuclear weapons. The summit will come at the end of Trump's scheduled trip to Europe, including a NATO summit in Brussels set for the 11th and 12th of July.
Getting along with Russia and with China and with everybody is a very good thing. It's good for the world, it's good for us, it's good for everybody. So we'll probably be meeting sometime around my trip to Europe. I think we'll be talking about Syria, I think we'll be talking about Ukraine, I think we'll be talking about many other subjects, and we'll see what happens. So you never know. You never know about meetings, what happens, right? But I think a lot of good things can come with meetings with people. We had great meetings with President Xi of China. We have, every place I've been, we have had great meetings. So maybe something positive will come out of it.
Well, we'll slip into a short break now. We'll round up some more international news on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
ऑल ओवर इंडिया बंगाल तो एक नंबर ही है, कलकत्ता तो फुटबॉल का मक्का ही है। जब फुटबॉल का बारे में सारा वर्ल्ड में चर्चा होगा, जो इंडिया फुटबॉल खेलता है उस टाइम बोलेगा तो कलकत्ता में फुटबॉल होता था।
We were there in top Asian countries up to the 70s, but from 80s there was a huge shift, both in strategy, in application of sports medicine, science, and other things where we lacked.
अच्छी तरह हम लोग प्रैक्टिस करेंगे और हम लोग दिल से एकदम मेहनत करके अगले फ्यूचर पर हम लोग वर्ल्ड कप खेल पाएंगे.
Watch the journey of soccer in India in our ground report, Football, the India Story, only on Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. This is World Panorama. I'm Rausan Pereira. Well, India and Seychelles have decided to jointly work on creating a naval base in strategically important Assumption Island in the Indian Ocean. India also gifted a Dornier aircraft to Seychelles that was dedicated to the country for its National Day on the 29th of June. India and Seychelles inked 6 MOUs after summit-level talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Seychelles President. Here are the details.
Uncertainty over the future of India's presence on strategically important Assumption Island is over. Seychelles President Danny Faure has announced that both countries will develop the island together. India had long proposed creating a naval base on the island but faced resistance from the opposition of the country. India has its strategic interests on the island. It can keep a watch on the movement of ships in the Indian Ocean, including near Pakistan and Iran from there.
Assumption द्वीप प्रोजेक्ट के संबंध में एक दूसरे के हितों के आधार पर मिलकर काम करने पर हम सहमत हैं। नेविगेशन चार्ट्स की उपलब्धता को सुधारने के लिए, हाइड्रोग्राफी सर्वेस करने के लिए हम व्यापक रूप से सहयोग कर रहे हैं।
In the context of maritime security, Assumption Island was discussed. We are equally engaged and will continue to work together, bearing each other's interest in mind. We have underscored our commitment to remain at the heart of joint initiatives and collective efforts to stimulate and facilitate cooperation in fields representing priorities on the sub-regional, regional, and continental agendas.
Faure, who's on a 6-day visit to India, had announced earlier that there would be no talks on Assumption Island. On the contrary, the issue was discussed in detail. During the summit-level meeting, India also announced an easy loan of $100 million for buying defense equipment. Both sides also signed 6 agreements on comprehensive development partnership in infrastructure development, education, cybersecurity, data sharing on ships, municipal cooperation between Panaji and Victoria, and training of Seychelles Foreign Service officials. India will also build the Seychelles Governor House, Police Headquarters and Attorney General Office building.
मैंने सेशल्स की राष्ट्रीय प्राथमिकता की परियोजनाओं के लिए प्रभावी योगदान को जारी रखने की भारत की प्रतिबद्धता दोहराई है। इन परियोजनाओं से न केवल सेशल्स की अर्थव्यवस्था बेहतर होगी, बल्कि इससे हमारे आपसी संबंध कई गुना प्रगाढ़ होंगे। स्पेशल ग्रांट के अंतर्गत सेशल्स में 3 सिविलियन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स को फाइनेंस करने के लिए भारत तैयार है।
On behalf of the people and government of Seychelles, I would like to say thank you for the announcement that you have just made. We will benefit from a second line of credit that will help with the infrastructure of our military defense forces in Seychelles.
India has also provided a Dornier aircraft to Seychelles that will be dedicated to the country on its National Day on the 29th of June. Earlier, the Seychelles President received a guard of honor and ceremonial welcome in the forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan. He also met President Ramnath Kovind and Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu. Akhilesh Suman's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
Moving on now, India said it will adhere to its stated policy on Iran and consult all stakeholders to ensure its own energy security. The response came in the wake of the US proposing a ban on oil imports from Iran from November. President Donald Trump's special envoy Nikki Haley met Indian leaders on the issue.
External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj held talks with US President's emissary Nikki Haley on the potential US ban on oil imports from Iran after the 4th of November. Swaraj is understood to have explained how Iran is strategically important for India to contain terrorism and maintain the balance of power for peace in the region. External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Ravish Kumar said India will engage with all stakeholders to ensure its own energy security.
I feel that Iran is a very traditional partner. We have historical civilization linkages with Iran. As far as we are concerned, we will take all necessary steps, including engagement with relevant stakeholders to ensure our energy security.
After the meeting with Swaraj, Haley raised the same issue with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Later, in a speech in Delhi before a gathering of Indian think tank, she explained how US saw Iran's quest for nuclear weapons as a threat to world peace. Haley also said US will not exempt India from secondary sanctions on companies that import oil from Iran.
We did talk about this. I did with Prime Minister Modi. We do have this in terms of our dialogue because I think that India also recognizes the threats of Iran. We understand the logistics that come into play with Iran. But we have to always make sure that the priority is peace and security. And as long as the priority is peace and security, the U.S. is going to continue to try and work with our partners, our friends, and our allies to make sure that we are all pushing Iran to be a good, accountable international neighbor.
Haley supported India's concerns on Pakistan and said the U.S. will continue to be tough on Pakistan to stop terrorist support and finance. She also slammed China for not adhering to democratic values and said it will limit US-China relations in future. Haley is on a 3-day visit to India to consult with Indian leadership on issues of bilateral and global importance. She also emphasized that postponement of the 2+2 meet between US and India on the 6th of July was not related to bilateral issues, but some other pressing engagements.
Both Iran and the trade issues are unprecedented moments for the world as far as US is concerned. And India has made it clear that India will go with its own national interests and not by the directive of any other country. Akhilesh Suman for Rajya Sabha Television with camera person Sudhanshu in Delhi.
And during her visit to India, UN Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, called on Prime Minister Narendra Modi in New Delhi on Wednesday. Nikki Haley noted the deepening relations between India and the US, particularly in strategic and defense sectors. Prime Minister Modi and US envoy also discussed ways to enhance India-US cooperation, including on counter-terrorism and in multilateral fora. They expressed confidence that strong India-US partnership will continue to be an important factor for global peace and prosperity. And finally, artworks depicting the King of Pop went on display in London on Thursday in a new exhibition looking at the singer's influence on artists. Michael Jackson on the Wall features an array of portraits and Jackson-inspired works in different forms, including a quilt, collages, videos and installations. The display showing at the National Portrait Gallery runs until October and then heads to France, Germany and Finland. I'm going to leave you with these visuals. Until next time, this is Rausan Pereira signing off.